What is the most computer illiterate thing you've witnessed? We hired a guy for software testing. We gave him a Word document that was basically text and screenshots about the application he was supposed to test. I left him alone for 30 minutes. He finally came to me and told me that he could not log into the application. I asked him what the error was, and he said he could not get the login prompt to accept any text. Well, he did not have the application up. He only had the Word document up. He was trying to log into a screenshot of the application. I couldn't help but laugh my butt off. TLDR, new employee was trying to log into a screenshot. When I was working at a fairly large firm, we had a lady from McKinsey come talk to us about the future of the computer industry and where the company should be investing. She did this too, repeatedly attempting to log into a screenshot, and she was absolutely clueless until some guy went and helped her. All my lower teeth came loose when my jaw hit the floor with a thud. I used to work tech support for a few ISPs. I once had a customer call in. He had just signed up and received his modem, but couldn't get online. After a few minutes I discovered that he didn't own a computer. I worked for a telecommunications company doing installation of high-speed data and cable. We had an elderly woman call in to set up new internet service, and she asked our call center rep, "Do you supply a modem, or will you use mine?" Our rep stated that we will supply her with a modem. When I got out to her house, I asked where she would like it set up, and she pointed to a monitor and a keyboard on a desk. I looked around but didn't see her PC tower, and it went like this. Me, "Where's the rest of your computer?" Her, "You guys said you'd bring the modem." Me, "Yes, I've got it right here, but where's your tower?" Her, "I threw it away. You said you were bringing one." She thought her PC case was a modem and tossed it, thinking we would be supplying her with a brand new computer. At least 5 times a year I have to deal with my computer froze up, so I grab 2 double-A batteries, go over to the employee's desk and place the batteries in the mouse. Voila! You should ask the company to stop buying wireless mice. Once I went to an office where the client was complaining that her computer broke at 10 o'clock every day, so I aimed to get there for 9:30. 10 came and went and not a single error to report. So I go and find the owner and tell her it's all okay. She asked if I could stay on and just check the system over for her. She offered me a cough, which, being a computer technician, I obviously accepted. So, she reaches behind the computer, pulls out the power cord and plugs it into a small kettle by the computer. She then points at the screen and screamed, "Look, it's just gone off again." Working in an office max about 8 years ago, the photo printing hype was just starting to get popular, and everyone and their grandpa wanted a photo printer. One day, this old man, at least 75, comes in and tells me he wants this particular HP photo printer, $200 model. I happily get one for him, and ring it out. Fast forward about 2 days, this old man calls the store and asks for me. I talk with him for a brief period of time. Here is how the conversation played out. Me, "Yes sir, what can I help you with?" Him, "Hi, you sold me that Hewlett-Packard photo printer the other day, right?" Me, "Yep." Him, "It isn't printing photos." Me, "Alrighty, let me just run you through a few questions, and hopefully we can get you to printing photos soon. First off, you have it plugged into the wall, and it is turned on, right?" Him, "Yep. The lights are all on and it is making noises." Me, "Okay, that's a good sign. Now I know I didn't sell you a USB cable. Are you using an existing cable to plug it into your computer?" Him, "I don't have a computer." Me, "I see. Do you have a digital camera? Are you able to take the memory card out of your digital camera and plug that into the printer?" Him, "I don't have a digital camera." Me, "Okay. What are you trying to print the photos from?" Him, "I saw all those pretty photos it was printing in the store, and I just wanted to have it print some pretty pictures to put up around my house." Me, "Fassapin, those pictures are a part of a demonstration program that we use only in the store. Tell you what, go ahead and bring the printer back. We'll give you a refund on the printer, and also give you a few high quality prints from the demo model to take home." TLDR, old man bought a printer to print photos without any computer or camera, thinking it would randomly print pretty pictures. I don't know why, but this made me enormously sad. So, a while back at the company I work at, there was this senior VP in the legal division as a patent attorney. This guy was one of the best patent lawyers at our company at the time. Really intelligent, and a lot of people looked up to him, and there were instances where the fate of the company was in his hands when the company was young and smaller. Now this guy has to deal a lot with patents and contracts, reading them, editing them, approving them, and so on. So with these documents that are typically around 20 pages but sometimes are up to 50, there is a lot of that involved. The editing process for this guy, however, was slightly different. You see, he didn't know how to copy and paste. So what does he do, you ask? He retypes every single contract and patent as it comes through, even for just slight edits. Retypes the whole freaking thing. 20 pages. With every single document he gets. He does this for 2 years before someone finds out and introduces him to copy and paste. One of my favorite workplace stories. I guarantee you this was actually part of his success. If he was forced to retype an entire document, he'd have to process it in his own words explicitly, which would help him truly understand what was going on, and ergo, provide the best suggestions for editing the patent. This sounds like an interesting, albeit tedious, method to truly learn and understand something. Back in the early 90s, we were using Procom to support users remotely. They just had to have a modem, install the software, and give us the number. Anyways, most of our clients were small non-profit outfits, typically staffed by older folks, and one of them was having issues. We tried to connect, got nothing. Asked them repeatedly, do you have a modem? Is it plugged in, turned on? Is it attached to the phone line? Is it attached to the computer? etc. All yes. So eventually we decided we'd have to make the 2+ hour drive to their location to help them in person. The modem was duct taped to the side of the monitor with nothing connecting it to the computer, except the tape. This must have been around 2003. I was working in IT at a big ad agency in NYC. I was doing a database project which dealt with financial data. I went down to accounting to sort some things out with one of the users. When I got there, I looked over the woman's shoulder while she was working, and I saw that she had an Excel spreadsheet open. The sheet had a column of numbers along with some other data. I then watched as she manually added up the numbers on an adding machine sitting on her desk and then typed in the total. I was floored. It turned out, the entire department worked like this. I tried to explain to her that Excel will do that automatically, but I was unable to get through. After a couple of attempts, I just gave up and went back upstairs. I once spent nearly 20 minutes walking a user through copy, paste, and save as in Word. By the end of the call, I was sitting slumped over with my head on my desk, muttering into my headset. I'd try to write up a transcript, but my mind has long since blocked the details of that memory. Older woman using the address book on her computer. Her. How do I send an email? Me. Click on mail in the dock. Her. Clicks on mail. Where did my address book go? Me. It's behind the mail window. Her. Looks behind the monitor. I work in the document management industry. Basically, this means my company makes software that turns your filing cabinets of paper into searchable indexed PDFs. I currently develop software for the company, but when I started, I was on the road 5 days a week doing installs and training. Here's my best story that came out of it. After training a woman on the software, she asked me before I left a question about an email that the salesman from my company sent her. I said I didn't know about that email and could she please forward it to me so I could read the chain. She said sure, hold on, and then executed the following chain of events. She printed the email. I figured she was just going to hand me that and be done with it. Most people can't get past using paper despite my best efforts. She then took the printout and left her office. I very confusedly followed her out the door. She walked down the hallway outside her office to the photocopier and then proceeded to make a copy of the printed email. I figured once again, okay, I guess she wants to have a copy for herself for some reason. She then took the copy and walked right past me back into her office and sat down at her desk. On her desk was a desktop scanner. She then proceeded to put the photocopy of the email onto the scanner and hit scan. At this point I am bewildered. She then takes the scanned image, attaches it to an email in Outlook, addresses the email to me, types FWD in the subject line, and sends me the email. So then I had on my BlackBerry a blank email with an attached image of the email she said she would forward me. Needless to say, I was floored. TLDR. Woman, instead of hitting forward email, printed the email, made a copy of it, scanned the photocopy of the email back into her computer, attached it to an email and sent me that. The biggest problem is that people who are computer illiterate incorrectly assume that their machine is smarter than them, and that's why they don't understand how to use computers. But in actuality, computers have no idea what you want them to do if you don't tell them in the few ways they understand things. The second biggest issue is impatience and reluctance to read instructions. If you were looking for your keys in your house, you don't immediately give up if they don't show up when you say, "Where is my keys?" Best line I've heard that summarizes this: a computer is a fast idiot. I taught a university class with another instructor which required students to install a bit of software. To help them, I recorded a screen capture film of the installation process with my voiceover. My co-instructor was not very computer proficient, so I played it for him to see if he could follow the instructions. We got to the end of the video and he says, "Great work. That was really easy." Rather pleased with myself, I prompted him to try installing the software. "What do you mean? Isn't it installed?" "No, that was just the instructional video." "What do you mean? What you watched was a video of how to install the software. It didn't actually install the software. Did something go wrong with the installation?" Best response: when you watch an infomercial about a new stain remover, it doesn't in fact remove the stains from the clothing in your dirty laundry basket. I can never change the homepage in my mom's browser from Google, or she can't use the internet. The internet is gone. Also, if she minimizes a window, it's gone forever. I also administratively locked the dock on her Mac because things kept disappearing. AKA, she clicked and dragged on accident and removed Safari from the dock. Haha, I've also had the internet is gone, as you, but also because the Internet Explorer icon had been deleted. This isn't my story but my dad's. He had his own little business for a while doing computer repairs. He got a call from a middle-aged woman complaining that every time she tried to reach the icons on the right side of her screen, her mouse would fall off the side of her desk. My dad replied, "Have you tried lifting the mouse up and moving it to the left?" Her, "Oh, thanks." My dad ran into someone once that would literally take the mouse and place it on the screen to move the cursor. Their accuracy was subpar since they couldn't see the cursor underneath their mouse. My dad double clicks on links every time, but he's been using computers for 30+ years and is pretty much the go-to tech support at his company of 20+ employees. He's fairly normal with everything else. That one thing just bugs me. Woman: "I can't copy this file." Me: "Alright, where is it?" Woman: "With my files." Me: "Could you show me where it is? Let's work this out." Woman opens Microsoft Word, goes to the menu and hits open. The file in question was some database file, so it doesn't open. Woman: "See." Me: "Let's go to your desktop and open my documents." Woman closes Word, back to the empty desktop, and proceeds to open Word. Open dialog. Woman: "I can do this normally." Opens a document. File. Save as. Network drive. Save. Me: "I'll rig it. Go back to your desktop. Now click on the icon that says My Documents." Woman: "Word is My Documents." Me: "Please mom, let me show you." I grab the mouse, exit Word, and teach her that My Documents exists outside of Word, and that you can drag files to save as them. That day, we figured out why that department had been asking for so many recoveries. I worked for an old guy who had no concept of opening files from Windows Explorer. If he wanted a Word doc, he would open Word and then open the document. Same for Excel. The funny thing was, if he didn't know what application the file was in, he would open each one in turn looking for the file. Used to work at a library with a public computer lab, so I've seen it all. My personal favorite: guy who has probably never used a computer before sits down and then proceeds to pick up the mouse and point it at the computer screen like a remote to try to select things. He was actually a time traveler from the future and couldn't understand your library's primitive technology. Me: "How can I help you?" Her: "Yeah, I know, you can, get bugs in your computer, How do I stop that from happening? Me. Wait. Do you think you have a virus or something? Her. No. Bugs. Me. I'm not sure what you mean. Her. Well, when I went to move my computer today, there were these little bugs under the desk, and I wanted to know if those are the bugs that get in your machine. Me. Silence. Her. Are these the bugs? I then had to explain to her that the computer bugs are not actual insects. It's a nice throwback to why bugs are called bugs. Client. Did you receive the document I emailed to you? Me. Number. I see an email from you, but no attachment. Client. I'll try again right now. Stay on the line. Okay. Me. Sure thing. Client. Did you get it? Me. Number. It's another email with no attachment. Client. I'll keep trying. My inbox is flooded with emails with no attachment. I know the client is an older person, so I intervene. Me. Tell me how you're trying to send this document to me and I'll try to help. Maybe you're doing something wrong. Client. Well, I start a new email and address it to you. Then I put my cursor over the paperclip icon to get it ready. Then I take the document and hold it to my screen, aka monitor. Then I hit enter to attach it to the email. Then I hit send. I'm doing it right, right? Me. Here, let me give you my fax number instead. I develop software for a living. Our software is typically used by older nurses ladies. At one point we got a tech support call that went a little like this. Phone ring. Tech support lady. Thank you for calling blurb tech support. How can I help you? Nurse. Yes, my computer is doing something weird. Support. Okay. Can you explain your problem to me? Nurse. If I walk away from the computer, sometimes when I come back there is a picture of a man riding a scooter on it. Support. I'm sorry? Nurse. Repeats. Support. Okay. It only happens if you leave the computer alone for a bit. Nurse. Yes. Maybe 5 minutes? Support. I think that is your screensaver. Nurse. What? Support. Your screensaver? It pops up when your computer is idle for a while. Nurse. What? Support. Here, let me just remote into you and leave it open for a bit and see if I see it. Nurse. Okay, great. So I should just leave it alone for a while? Support. Sure, I'll call you when I figure it out. Nurse. Great. Support. Remotes in. Right clicks desktop. Open screensaver. It's a man riding a scooter. Disables screensaver. Calls nurse back. Support. Hello, is this nurse? Nurse. Yes. Support. I've fixed the issue for you. You should no longer see a man riding a scooter on your computer. Nurse. Oh, thank you. Support. My pleasure. I worked phone tech support during dial-up days. Needless to say I have a lot of stories. Like a guy using his mouth like a foot pedal, a woman who couldn't get her computer during power outage, and a woman with horrible static on their phone line caused by an electric fence to keep the bears out. But 99% of phone calls went like this. Caller. I can't get online. Me. What does the error message say? Click click. Caller. It says no dial tone. Me too. Standard power outage fix. Me. Okay sir. Go to your microwave. Sir. Okay. Me. Switch it on. Sir. It's broken as well. Me. Phone your power company. Click. I saw someone once take a digital photo of their computer screen, then upload it back onto their computer to be emailed. Bit ashamed, but I've had to do this. Back in my Windows days, my installation was all nuts and buggy and would not print screen, among other things. Also do this if I kill my bootloader, or some other crap during boot. Oh hi there, command line login. My grandparents asked me to come over because their computer wasn't working. What was happening was they couldn't hear any sounds from the computer. I unmuted the computer and turned on the volume. At my last job my boss was fairly proficient with Excel and he loved to use it. He made a spreadsheet for just about everything and even had some knowledge on using formulas, but every time he wanted to save progress on something he was working on, he would X out of the window and click yes when the pop-up came up asking if he would like to save his document. He would then open the spreadsheet again and resume working on it. Drove me absolutely batshit crazy. When I was working help desk a long time ago, CAD engineer thought rebooting her machine was turning the monitor off and back on. How the frick could she operate CAD? My mother accidentally deleted some icons on her desktop. She called me up freaking out that she deleted AOL. Yes, she still pays for AOL, and all of her emails and email addresses were gone forever. My ex's mother screamed bloody murder at her daughter for signing out of her email. She thought if you weren't signed in, you didn't get the emails. I swear to God, she was absolutely freaking out, and she's a CPA. My dad drove me all the way out to his office so I could fix his computer at work. In his words, he did something to it, and now it was not working. When he shows it to me, the first thing I see is the loose dangling cords for the monitor, keyboard, and mouse. Facepum. You fix the stupid problem in 2 minutes and say, "Welp, all fixed. Time to go." Let them bask in their own ignorance. I used to work for the civil service. Some managers working remotely would ask their secretaries to print emails and post them to them because they didn't feel comfortable using email. In a similar thread a few months ago, someone who worked at a computer type place had a customer who would come in a couple times a year to buy a new laptop battery. The fellow didn't realize you could recharge laptop batteries. I once saw my mom trying to drag and drop a file across 2 laptop monitors. You have to use an external mouse for that. Plug mouse into one computer, right click, select copy, unplug the mouse, plug it into the other laptop, right click, select paste. We used to have a woman in the office who would get a document in an email, print it out, scan it, and then save it for our records on our server. I was in QFC, grocery store, the other day, and someone had clearly signed on the digital signature pad using a pen. Their name was there, for everyone to see how dumb they were. I've seen that in almost every place I've ever shopped in, very disconcerting. An engineer doing technical drawings in Excel with the monitor brightness turned almost all the way down. I asked what he was doing and he said he preferred working in DOS. My dad, he'll ask for help, I'll press buttons and fix it. Then he'll say things like, "So that command line abc 0320840932 is doing some crap to my quantum processing hardware, but I figured something out." Crap like that. I'm not sure if he's bad at describing things or just tries to figure things out on his own. It's nice that he's learning, but I get the feeling that he comes to his own horribly inaccurate conclusions. Me. "Okay dad, I'm going to teach you some computer basics." Dad, "Okay fine." Me. "Do you know what a web address is?" Dad, "Yes." Me. "Okay, what's a web address?" Dad, "It's where a spider lives." My dad used to write his emails in Notepad, then attach them to his email and send them. My dad got pissed off at Bill Gates for some ungodly reason, so he deleted Windows. Then he found out that he needs Windows to use his computer. I'm pretty sure his tech guy hates him. This'll show him. When I was in middle school, I sat next to a guy who navigated to Google after visiting another website. He highlighted the entire Google search page, then proceeded to hover his finger over the delete button on the keyboard, apparently thinking that pressing the button would permanently erase Google from the World Wide Web. He looked at me and said, "Do you dummy?" "I don't know, man. That could get you in trouble," I replied. He pushed the button and proceeded to freak out when he was taken back to the previous page, thinking he was about to be in serious trouble for single-handedly eradicating a prominent website. I myself am not technologically inclined, and I'm not up to date with a lot of the gadgets that are on the market. I once thought that an iPad was a phone, and put it up to my ear and mouth as though it were one. I remember everyone's laughter as I was told what it really is. I would be a dang big phone. Had a lady tell me that you should always keep a computer warm because you don't want it catching a bug or virus. This was in 1997, so I'd say she was ahead of her time. My dad once tried to delete the internet. He was getting frustrated at our slow computer, and so he shouted "frick it" and tried to delete the internet by deleting the shortcut. I'll say it again, shortcut to Internet Explorer. And he thought, by doing so, he deleted the internet from the entire world. This sounds reasonable. When he tries to get back on, tell him he's banned for vandalism. I have a few. One was someone complained that their browser wasn't working. Had a look at it, they weren't connected to the internet. Woman asked me why her laptop wasn't charging. Had a look at it, the plug wasn't switched on. Was creating a results booklet for an experiment in human biology. Started to create a table in Microsoft Word. The girl next to me shouts, "You're using the wrong program. You can't get grids in text editors." "Ah yes, the good old I know better than you and you're doing it wrong." Reply: "I have some sort of butt clenching reflex that goes off every time that happens." Classic. What is the most unbelievable instance of computer illiteracy you've ever witnessed? 1995-96. We, a small consultancy, got a call from an accountant who told us that his new PC system's HDD was reporting as full and he felt that was unlikely. I was sent to investigate and found that his HDD was indeed returning errors. I asked him what software he used and he said MS-DOS. I rephrased and asked what software he used for his accounting. He said again, MS-DOS. I asked him to show me and he began, straightforwardly enough at the time, by navigating to a working subdirectory. He then proceeded to create file after file after file. It turned out he was using DOS as a filing system, creating individual records by creating corresponding files. He wrote nothing in the file. All his information was contained in his choice of file names and extensions. It all worked. It did what he wanted, but it had put him at the limit of what a DOS file system could handle at the time. That's like learning how to walk on your hands because you can't figure out feet. It was me, a long time ago, before webcams were common. I ended up at this webpage where it said something like there was a new technology where the screen would take your picture and then show it to you. So I went and brushed my hair, changed my shirt and came back to get my picture. I smiled and pressed the button. It made like a flash and then said to wait up to 5 minutes for the result. I waited patiently as I saw the picture slowly loading, only to finally reveal a picture of an orangutan. My first case of being trolled by the internet. That's an absolutely brilliant post, D. I work with a guy who for 2 months and countless visits from our IT guy claimed that his computer was still going slow. So the IT guy set a dead computer tower, which isn't even plugged into anything, next to the one that he was using, and now my co-worker says it goes twice as fast. It's called the PCBO effect. A co-worker of mine, an older gentleman, knew how to use Excel, but nothing else. When he needed to type up a document, instead of opening up a word processor, he would open up Excel and just type his document into one cell that he enlarged to the size of an 8.5x11 piece of paper. Well, at least he's resourceful and able to problem solve. My uncle has step-by-step instructions for accessing his email, which is the only thing he does on his computer. Anytime he makes a mistake, he shuts down the computer and starts over. He also moves the mouse into position, takes his hand off completely, then pokes the button very carefully. He also moves the mouse into position, takes his hand off completely, then pokes the button very carefully. This is awesome. I've seen older people do this. The first email my dad sent me when I went away to college, and the first email he ever wrote, didn't have any spaces in it. It was just one long word dotted with occasional punctuation. He didn't know what the space bar was and thought the computer would just add the spaces automatically. It was hilariously adorable, and every time I think about it I get a little sad I didn't print out and frame that email. The only way to teach an old person to type is to tell them the keys are almost exactly like a typewriter, but you don't have to press as hard. I work as tech support at a university, so computer illiteracy keeps me employed. There's one professor I've had to teach to right-click on multiple occasions. Also, just last week a woman, corporate client, called about a strange message on her computer. Outlook had detected she moved time zones and asked if she wanted her laptop to change times to reflect her new location. It's just asking if you want to adjust your email to your new time zone since you're an hour earlier here. So I'll get my emails an hour earlier? Some people really think computers are magic. Back in the days of MS-DOS and the good old Windows 3.1, my uncle picked up a new PC, a powerhouse of the time. He never had a PC. He'd been a Commodore 64 guy for a long time though. Anyway, I visited my grandparents, where he also lived, and he showed me his computer. I was in awe. It was so good compared to my own. I played a game of Strife and after went out to play. Later that day I'm asked by my grandmother, what did you do to your uncle's computer? I don't know what she's talking about and go to talk to him. He's mad. The thing won't boot and I broke it. Get it to boot and check out the HDD. It's in shambles. I ask, what were you doing when it stopped working? Deleting files you put on there. I don't need your garbage on my machine. He deleted random files from the OS until it stopped working. Long story short, in one day I reinstalled DOS and Windows on that thing 6 times. Yes, he kept doing it and wouldn't listen when I told him he couldn't just do that. I never touched his PC again afterwards. He still brings up the time I broke his new computer. That would be met with no, you broke your computer 6 times and I fixed it for you for free every time it came up. Public shaming is the only viable tool there. I worked in tech support in the mid-90s at a company where computers for admins and sales were a relatively new thing, so I have a million stories. Got a call from an employee insisting her new, tested mouse wasn't working. Went through all the questions. Is it plugged and do you see the arrow on the screen? And could hear her clicking, so I knew she was at least doing something. I finally went to her desk and saw that she was using her mouse up against the monitor, trying to click on things right on the screen instead of understanding the mousepad on the desk, cursor on the screen setup. That's absolutely precious. My mom seriously thinks she can only access email from the computer on which it was set up. She has created a new email address for each new computer she got. I'm a graphic designer and I once had a client sitting next to me whilst designing her a logo. I zoomed into the logo on screen and she said, "Oh no, not that big." I explained it wasn't going to be that big and I was just making it bigger on the screen so it's easier to edit. Thought she understood until I zoomed out a few minutes later and she said, "Oh yes, that's a better size." I once caught my little brother, then around age 10, holding a ruler against the screen to measure the size of the pictures of a collage he was planning to print. He's going into graphic design now. Sure come a long way. Work in IT for a large corporation and I had a senior lawyer, mid-30s at my company, complain that the Wi-Fi wasn't working when she left the building. Needless to say, I was staggered by the ineptitude. Took a physics course from a professor who got their PhD in biomechanical physics, i.e. how fast the cell moves or at what rate does the mitochondrial proteins work. Complicated science stuff. One day the professor was using PowerPoint for a lecture. The Adobe Update icon popped up and they had no idea how to resolve it. They restarted the computer and within 5 minutes it popped up again. The entire class watched in amazement as this professor struggled with the Adobe Update icon. The professor cancelled class for IT to come fix the issue. It's always amazing watching professors with years of training and knowledge in a specific field struggle with the simplest of problems. Coworker asked me to turn the clicking sound off on her keyboard. She thought that the sound keys make when you type on the computer keyboard was a sound effect similar to when you type on a cell phone. Nope, it was her long fake nails making the keys clack. She refused to believe me, so I told her to call tech support. No idea how they handled it. LOL. Unplug it, then have her type. In recent memory, I can recall an instance where my mom had a recipe open in Chrome, and I wanted to show her a YouTube video. I opened another tab in the browser and she got mad at me because she thought I deleted the recipe. One time I heard my dad cursing at his computer in the basement. It started with single word shoots and dammits and slowly progressed itself into a rage. Finally, with a tone of desperation, he called for my help. I walked in. I was working and then it just disappeared and I can't get it back, he explained, his hands moving wildly from me to the screen to the sky. It's gone. As he went on, I stooped over with the mouse and dragged up the window that apparently had been moved and was peeking just above the taskbar. He facepalmed and gave me a light jab on the shoulder in appreciation. What would I do without you? I love my dad, but I fear for him now that I live on my own. Slowly progressed itself into a rage. What would I do without you? Rage against the machine. Not an instance, but an ongoing series of what the frick is wrong with you? Mid-90s, early days of using the web to interface data with outside entities. I developed a process at work to interface our mainframe with an external print service. It requires the user to download the mainframe files, sign on to the remote site, and upload the files. The process takes place 7 or 8 times a year. I documented it step by step. I explained it to my manager and the user's manager. They agreed the process is logical and straightforward. I showed the end users how to do it. They seemed to understand. 3 years later and I was still changing the documentation to account for all the ways the users found to not follow the step-by-step documentation. Nearly every billing run was screwed up because they found new and interesting ways to frick up. Click with the left button. No, not the right. Why are you double clicking? Why are you double clicking so slow? Why are you double right clicking? Mashing the mouse button does not make the computer understand what you meant to do. Try not to move the mouse halfway across the screen when you click. Oh, that last one should have been an acceptable defense for justifiable homicide. All these issues result in bizarre web form behavior, and that was just the clicking. If they got the clicking right, it was what they were clicking inside and outside the browser window that screwed it all up. BTW, the process takes place in the middle of the night and they would either call me, read, wake, so I could walk them through it, bad, or not call me and our billing would be delayed, worse because the billing data was dated. Guess who had to do damage control on the data to fix the issue? 20 years later and one of the users still calls me to walk him through it. At least now, the process takes place during the workday and I can be on hand to help. In the battle of making idiot-proof software, the idiots will always win. I love my dad, but it still boggles my mind how computer illiterate he can be. Of all the situations, I'd say this one takes the cake. His laptop needed to be fixed for some reason, so he was using my sister's laptop at the time. He calls me up to tell me he can't find his files. Confused, I asked him to explain what he means. He says that he always keeps all of his folders files on his desktop, but that none of them are there. I say to him, but you're using your daughter's computer. How would you have access to files on your computer? There's a brief moment of silence, until he says to me, but the files are on my desktop. Shouldn't I be able to access them now? Suffice to say, I had to explain a few things to him then, most of which just went in one ear and out the other. I don't know if this fits, but a young lady in the office complained her computer would randomly lose power while she was working. After a lot of effort to solve the problem, including changing out the computer, the problem was determined to be her height. Since she was short, she used the power strip to prop her feet and kept accidentally pushing the power button. Happens to me all the time. Not necessarily computer illiteracy, but I have an old man come by my work once a week and has me unlock his iPhone. He doesn't have a password, just needs to swipe right to unlock the screen. Don't even know what he does with it afterwards. I used to work as the tech guy in a high school. One day, the head teacher's secretary called me to reception because the fax machine wasn't working. I had a look at it and it seemed to work fine, so I asked her to show me what she was doing when the fault occurred. So she put the document in the slot, typed in the number, the machine whirred up and the document popped out the other side, as normal. You see, she said. No, not really. What's the problem? She looked at me like I was a complete and utter moron, snatched up the document and started waving it at me saying it's still here. And that's why I had to explain to a grown woman that a fax machine isn't a teleportation device. Somewhere, someone was getting the same thing faxed a lot. I sincerely hope my wife does not have a secret Reddit account, or for that matter, does not know my Reddit account. If she does find this out, I'll probably not be alive. Whenever we had internet issues, she would yank out the RJ45 from the cable modem, blow air into it 10 times and place it back into the modem. I never understood this ritual, until one day I took up the courage to ask why. The response I got was that, since she was accessing too many sites, there could be a blockage in the modem. I did ask her the same question several times over the course of the next few years. I once convinced a person that the reason they needed a new Ethernet cable was that the cable had been squashed and all the zeros had jammed the wire because it was too narrow now and only the ones would fit through. Retired co-worker Wit would forget all her passwords about 3 times a week. Also, Her phone had a bunch of memory cleaner and battery saver apps which actually slowed it down and made the battery discharge faster. My dad has a bunch of those apps on his phone and I'm unconvinced they don't do exactly what you said. He believes them, so. My co-worker doesn't know how to create a PDF directly on the computer, so she prints things out then scans them to create a PDF. A lady at my work couldn't figure out how to take a screenshot of a web page, so she printed it out and scanned it and then sent it as an all-staff message. My grandfather, bless him, in his late 70s just learning how to use a computer, and he would enjoy spending an hour or so in the evenings getting creative using the Paint app on his laptop. I was talking to him about replacing the ink in his printer as it was running low. Then a look of horror came over him and he leaned in closely and said, I've been using the Paint app on my computer, how much ink have I been wasting? He thought using the Paint on his computer, without printing it, was using up his expensive ink. Bless him, that still makes me laugh. My nana asked my mother where the film went into her mobile phone when taking a photo. I work in recruiting and I will often ask people to email me over their resume. Not only will many people not know how to do that, some will try and fail miserably. I had one guy, he was older, tell me multiple times that he has his resume saved in his email and that I can go log onto his email and go get it. I said no, that's not how email works. You have to send it to where you want it to go. He proceeded to tell me his email address and say again that I can just log on and get it. Wasn't worth trying to explain anymore. Another woman told me that she can't email her resume to me because her email address is at yahoo.com and ours is at companyname.com and they are different. I explained to her that the domain name doesn't matter, you can email to any domain names that you want. They are just different companies and we'll still receive the email. She tried to argue with me saying that she has Yahoo and only can send to other Yahoo. I again tried to explain and told her how just like calling people with different area codes. It's just a way to classify and you can send an email to any email address. She wasn't getting it. We never got her resume. As a college student nearing graduation, it calms my nerves that there are people this clueless in the workforce. End user thought she could reboot her machine by turning the monitor off on. I got curious when it only took 2 seconds for her to restart, so I had to walk to her cube to see for myself. I hate it when people do that. They always get so defensive of it too. I have a coworker who made a PowerPoint presentation by taking pictures of her computer screen with her smartphone, emailing them to herself and then putting them in the presentation, instead of using print screen or snipping tool. It was both hilarious and embarrassing. At the place I work at, this older woman that doesn't understand the concept of tabs will literally use multiple computers in our computer lab for each window she opens. I've explained to her what tabs are probably like 5 times and she still refuses to understand. Be careful what you wish for. I recently discovered that my mother had literally like 1000 tabs open in Safari on her iPad. It was so bogged down she almost bought a new one. My mom came to me and told me that a window had appeared on the computer. I went with her to see what it was. There was nothing there. I asked her why there wasn't anything there, and she told me that she had closed it. I told her that there was nothing I could do, and to leave it open if it came back. Next day she comes and tells me that it came back, so I go with her to her computer. There's nothing there. She had closed it again. I repeat what I had told her the day before, and she starts getting annoyed at me for not being able to fix her computer. This keeps happening and I grow savvy. One day when she comes to me I ask if she closed it again, which she did. I refuse to drop what I'm doing to come look at her wallpaper, and she gets angry at me for being unhelpful. After this she stops coming to me. If I had to guess I'd say she went to my dad to get him to fix the computer and got the same message from him. When I got my first optical mouse I spent a whole afternoon trying to get it to work. Downloading drivers, rebooting, googling tech websites, repeat. Turned out it wouldn't work on a black table. When my friend's mum finds an error in her text she will delete everything she has written since the mistake, correct it, and then retype the whole thing. It's like what we do with passwords when we make a typo. Because it's hidden we just delete the whole thing and start again. Or at least I do. Tried to teach my 89-year-old grandmother the internet because I told her it had recipes on it. An hour and 30 minutes of my life I want back. We had a bad experience hiring a computer programmer for my company once. We ended up using a recruiter due to a lack of initial candidates. Most of the new candidates weren't local, so we held Skype video interviews. One of the applicants couldn't get his camera working for the technical interview, so we did a phone interview. He aced all of our technical questions, and we ended up hiring him. The guy moves and shows up for his first day. As part of the orientation he has to read some documents on a shared drive. When told to find them on the already mapped network drive he looked confused. He was walked through that, but then he was told to open an app, and couldn't find it, since there were no shortcuts on his desktop. He was told to open the start menu and search for it. He failed at opening the start menu. A computer programmer couldn't use basic Windows functions. He was terminated a short time later. It seems like the recruiting company provided a stand-in for the interview process, so they paid us back for our expenses and we don't use them anymore. I once witnessed the owner of a fairly large company work the mouse while a subordinate worked the keyboard. They were older gentlemen. It was adorable, like two toddlers working on a Rubik's Cube. I sometimes do that as a challenge with my friends, playing CS GO. My mom sent me a text asking if my internet was out because hers wasn't working. I reminded her that we lived 1,200 miles away from each other. She was just checking on the global communications network. Since you put computer illiteracy in quotes, this is not computer related, just technology related. My grandmother was from the old country and never learned to speak English. She kept asking us to buy a TV that was made in the old country, so that she could watch TV shows in her native tongue. I worked with a woman who would tell me her web page was wrong. She didn't have a web page. It took me a while to figure out she meant her desktop display. Her excuse? I can't remember all those terms. You'll just have to know what I call stuff. I had to do support for the whole office. She thought it was perfectly reasonable that I should learn 12 different names for common computer things instead of her having to learn the correct ones. She was also a bee. She's also dead now, and I don't care. When my granddad got a new computer, he set everything up and wanted to plug in the mouse into the HDMI port. He jammed it in, it didn't work. He jammed it the other way around. It obviously didn't work. So he stripped the USB cable and soldered it into the port. Now that's dedication. Way back in the day when my family got our first computer, we were all learning how to use it. This was in the early 90s and PCs didn't do a whole lot. Ours was basically a glorified word processor with memory and solitaire. One day my mom was writing some poetry in Word and after having saved the file decided it was embarrassing or something and wanted to delete it. Unable to find the right file, she somehow ended up deleting some seriously crucial stuff and I ended up having to reinstall MS-DOS and Windows all over again, off of 3.5 disks. If I had to estimate how many disks this took, I'd say between 30 and frick my life. We got our first computer when I was 13. I was the only one in the house with computer experience, and it wasn't a lot. I don't remember what exactly my father wanted me to do to it, but it was something along the lines of rewriting the OS, Win98, to make a working man's computer. He was very upset that I wasn't willing to try and hack Windows. Some 18 years ago, Kevin was having a new database program deployed in his auto body shop. The technician was showing him how to navigate around the program when Kevin gave him a pad of paper and pen and asked the tech to write down the steps he needed to know. The tech took the pad and pen and began to write. In just a few seconds he handed the pad back to Kevin. Somewhat bewildered, Kevin grasped the paper and looked down to see 3 words. Read the screen. I used to work in IT at a high school around 2011 and got a few amazing ones. One teacher called me in for an unrelated issue. The setup was a really crappy one where the tower was right next to the mousepad. I asked her to click something for me. She moved the mouse to the right until it touched the tower, and then instead of readjusting her position, she went up the side of the tower with the mouse, clicked, then held it there. I tried to act professional and not laugh, but I have no doubts that my eyes were sticking out of my head while I strained to not die laughing right there. These people educate your children. Computer technicians, what's the most bizarre thing that you have found on a customer's computer? I have a buddy who works IT. One of the best stories he has ever shared was about a person who didn't know there was an eject button for floppy disks and ended up pouring liquid butter into the disk drive so that he could lubricate it enough to rip it out with a pair of pliers. As the guy was explaining all this, my friend snatched the floppy from his hand and popped it into the drive. The guy immediately started freaking out since it took him like 2 hours to pry the sucker out. My friend just hit the eject button and stood there holding the floppy disk right in front of his face as the guy looked back and forth between the disk and the computer like, "Are you freaking serious?" I love how his first impulse was to use liquid butter. User departing the firm. Recent manager in her late 20s asks to retrieve her personal images. She traveled a lot to tropical places and had an entire folder dedicated to candid photos of guys' junk in swimsuits. Seems like a lot of work when she could just post a picture of herself doing something completely innocuous on Reddit and get thousands of dong pics for free. No vacation required. I do IT support for a school and had a teacher call me one day as 17 of the laptops the students use all stopped working at the same time. The teacher claimed that we must have rolled out an update that had broken all the machines, so was irate that we fix what we did now, as she couldn't teach without team. Only when I got a hold of the laptops which did I learn the teacher had them all working outside on a rainy day studying weather etc. It was a weird chain of events, but I got involved in regaining access to a notebook PC that had belonged to the husband of the daughter of a friend of my boss who had recently committed suicide. The computer was his work PC and the deceased person's boss or business partner was looking for something that had been stored on it, but they were vague about what they actually were looking for. The drive wasn't encrypted, so it was pretty trivial to blank out the password for administrator and enable the account so that I could log in. I reset the passwords for the rest of the accounts and went looking to see if the data was still there or if I might need to attempt some file recovery on the hard drive. What was kind of weird is that there were multiple local accounts on the PC and none of them really looked like they had been used much. Normally, people have crap all over their desktop, bookmarks, etc. This PC just really didn't look like it had been used much at all, so I was suspecting that the account and user profile the deceased had actually been using had been deleted. What I did find was child P in the pictures folder, not hidden at all. The thumbnails were set to X large so there wasn't much mistaking what I was seeing, even without opening individual files. I reported the find to the police and had to show an officer what I found. When I informed the mill about the finding and police report, she seemed surprisingly unfazed, like she was expecting us to find the child P. Afterwards, my co-workers and I came to the conclusion that the deceased killed himself because his child P habits had been discovered or strongly suspected and that Mill wanted this evidence discovered after he killed himself. Too much hentai. Hentai desktop. Hentai videos. Hentai games. Hentai manga. Hentai pictures. He brought it in because he thought he had a virus. I was polite and didn't really react or say anything when I first saw the desktop wallpaper. I still can't believe somebody can be so nonchalant about such a massive P collection. Holy crap. So that's where my PC ended up when it was stolen. One of my older customers had a saved bookmark for Dungeon P. The laptop was always overly greasy. Went through a bottle of hand sanitizer every time I dealt with him. Went through a bottle of hand sanitizer every time I Greek letter dealt with him. FTFY. This was back in the late 90s and the dude had a folder marked jerks, doucher bags and buttholes, so I had some free time and investigated. He literally kept files on every piece of celebrity misconduct he unearthed. Thanks to him, I learned John Lennon beat his wife way ahead of everyone else. If I recall correctly, he also kind of just abandoned his son. Mid-late 90s. I was the Apple tech for a small, local dial-up ISP, one of the local TV station where the guys was having major issues trying to get his dial-up to work, and I was having trouble diagnosing it over the phone, so I offered to get it fixed for him if he brought in his machine. He left it at our shop for me to fix, and he picked it up the next day. So much P. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He must have been using the station's multiple T1s to download it, because the files were massive, for the time. I got his issue fixed, and he was happy. Only a select few of my other techs knew about it. He is now the major elder TV weatherman in our city. You keep rocking. Balls of Steel Bob. Balls of Steel Bob. Please tell me they call him that on the air. The absolute worst was when I was at my first job. I was around 16 and worked with an older 21-year-old girl who was teaching me a lot. One day a customer walks in with an old PC that looked heavy. I took it to the back of the store and went back to the customer to ask a few questions when we suddenly hear my co-worker scream really loud. There was a cockroach, but it didn't look normal. Look up a Madagascar cockroach and ugh. Disgusting thing, but whatever. Killed it and moved on with work. A few minutes later there was another one, but we couldn't figure out where they were coming from until we opened the PC and we found it infested. There was this huge nest of them. Still have nightmares about it. Disgusting. Should have made an update to get rid of those nasty bugs. 1. Thousands of photographs of creepy dolls. Like, tens of thousands. And of different creepy dolls. 2. Hundreds of tiny postage stamp sized pictures of women's toes. Assuming female toes, they all had scarlet red toenail polish. All the pictures appeared to be consensual, as in they were posed, but obviously amateur. 3. Enough bookmarks to white supremacy and anti-Semitic sites to choke a Clydesdale. 4. Several hundred GB, back when disk space wasn't cheap at all, of gay pee. It's bizarre only because the person that owned the PC was loudly, virulently anti-gay. Obviously. Later, I realized he was one of those self-hating types. He later did come out, but when I found the files it was a serious WTF moment, especially since it was on a work PC. I choose to believe all 4 of these are the same person. I once opened up an HP inkjet printer that wasn't working. Inside I found all the tiny wires has been cut into tiny pieces a few long. It was as if someone has simply cut them with scissors into lots of small pieces. I also found insect remains and put 2 and 2 together. So concluded some weird African insects. This was in Africa. Has crawled in there and being attracted to the power in the wires had proceeded to cut them into pieces. Told client to throw out the printer. I mean, WTF. I thought you were going to say the customer had attacked the insects inside the printer and cut them up with scissors, and in the process also damaged their printer. On a middle management laptop, a JPG of a woman's lower parts with a leak stuffed up her privates. The file was named after a woman in the office. Welsh P. I've got a good story for this one. Not something I found on a customer's computer so much as the events surrounding the situation. Years ago, in my consulting days, a customer brought in 2 desktops. They were covered in dirt, inside, outside, everywhere. It looked like someone had literally shoveled dirt into them. He was pretty blunt about what happened. He said his wife had been having pretty explicit chat sessions with some guy on the internet. In a rage, he took his and her computers out and buried them in the backyard. He then thought better about it and brought them into us in hopes of having them fixed. That was pretty much the last time we saw him. We cleaned both workstations up and actually managed to salvage them. They sat on the shelf for a good year and a half waiting for their owner to come pick them up, but he never came. We eventually disposed of them since they had been there for a long time and repeated attempts to contact the guy had failed. One day, probably about 2 years after the guy showed up and 6 months after we had scrapped his PCs, a couple deputies from the local sheriff's office showed up with a warrant to seize his equipment, which we no longer had possession of, but they were surprisingly unconcerned when I told them we didn't have it. Turned out his wife had disappeared, and when the guy was questioned about it he confessed to killing her. They found her buried in his backyard. From a friend who was working in a computer shop a few years ago. Guy had an issue with his computer running slow. My friend looked through it, discovered there's a fair number of movies, I hesitate to call it P, on the guy's machine. All of people driving nails into themselves, scrotums and breasts mostly, small nails, big nails, with various sizes of hammers, some even nailing themselves, or getting nailed, to pieces of wood. He said it all seemed consensual though, but all the techs in the shop had a very WT-fastic afternoon. My everything hurts just from reading this. The strangest thing I ever found was in a customer's computer. This was back in 2002-ish. His DVD drive didn't work and he complained that there were screws rattling around in it. I opened it up and found the P4 LED wasn't connected. Drive issue solved, and the screws were actually a half-eaten 1-pound bag of peanut M&Ms poorly tied off with a rubber band. Someone on the HP assembly line had a major case of the frickets apparently. Well, did you finish the bag? A parent brought in their kids. By kid he was 29. Windows 10. The fan stopped working so it was an easy fix. I logged on to make sure everything was working and there was no other issues and there was a single folder titled Pop Rocks. Curious. I clicked on the folder. There were at least 500 photos of sexual explicit My Little Pony P inside. P in some odd folder. Checks out. My Little Pony P. Abort. Abort. Please no more. I saw lots and lots and lots of screenshots of the Chrome browser. Like every activity was recorded. Probably 1000s of images. There are programs marketed at abusive husbands and Mormon parents that take an auto screenshot every few minutes. I learned that emptying the trash is a bad idea after working on the computer of a person who stored literally everything in trash. Malware scan. 700 hits. This is quite a few, but scanners will hit bits of malware and flag it as a separate thing even if it is just a part of a larger thing. Generally this is redeemable and carries a stern lecture to the customer about internet safety. Remove malware. Second malware scan to make sure we are good. 2500 hits. Not looking good. Try to remove malware again. Computer flat out refused to boot. I pulled the drive, put it into a quarantine machine and saved as much data as I could. Luckily the documents folder was clean. This guy had LimeWire, BearShare, a couple other similar programs, and like 250 gigabytes of pirated media. This was in 2011 when LimeWire and others were basically a virus trading service. He got one heck of a lecture. I was honestly scared I'd find some really fricked up P, but he just had no concept of the risks pirating carries. Well, some of you probably remember the airplane accident in Smolensk in 2010 where a lot of Polish politicians, including the president, died. I was told to make backups of all photos, so naturally I had to go through the whole drive. I found multiple photos of the president's limbless, burnt body, totally uncensored, crap you'd find on the deep web. Pretty bizarre, but I didn't mention it obviously. I was installing our software on a customer's computer and had downloaded their logo from a website in order to add it to a report and the default save location was pictures. On going to the folder to retrieve the image I was presented with an array of pictures of a man's pierced genitalia. The things you do when you are drunk was the sentence I heard from behind me. Turns out the photos were of his own piercing so I then had to spend the next 2 days working with a man whose penis I'd just seen in photo form. I work for a school where each student is provided a laptop. We have a fairly diverse student population, so while one kid might drive a Mercedes to school, another might have missed the past week because the option was him and his siblings eat, or he pays for a new uniform so one of the assistant principals doesn't give the kid escalating punishments every time the kid is seen out of uniform. Anyways, one kid brings a laptop to the desk that's running poorly. These laptops have a couple trouble spots, one of which is the RAM. Having been replaced over summer by bored kids, has a tendency to be bad from time to time. I open up the bottom, when like a party favor from heck, bedbugs come flying out. Bedbugs everywhere. I reach for the nearest heavy object, which just so happens to be a screwdriver, and begin playing whack-a-bug with the screwdriver. I think I get all of the ones that came out of the laptop, but there's still quite a few on the inside. I douse the thing in an unholy combination of Gooby Gone and Windex, to the point where it's no longer a viable option for student use. All the while, the student is staring at me with this blank expression, like she fully freaking expected this to happen. I calmly-ish drop it directly into an empty trash bag, empty the contents of the Windex, and tell her to come back at lunch for her new laptop. The head custodian stopped by, chuckled, and said he'd get the place cleaned up for me. Handed me a spray bottle of rubbing alcohol, which I promptly emptied into the bag of ex-computer. He seemed impressed by my intent on killing anything alive inside that bag. I called my wife on the way home, and had me meet outside with a trash bag. stripped to my boxers on the front porch. My wife threw everything into a hot wash load. Neighbor saw the whole thing. All I could muster was a sad wave. I think she understood. In the end, the laptop was just thrown away. It accidentally got mixed up with actual trash and pitched. Nothing of value was lost. The girl who brought the laptop up has a younger sister who every few weeks gets sent to the office due to being covered in bedbugs. I'm going to go take a shower now. I appreciate your strategy for your clothes when you got home. I was in beauty school and one day a bunch of patrons they had lice. When I got home I did the same thing. Unfortunately I went home to my boyfriend at the time's bachelor pad and I had to sprint in my underwear to the bathroom past a bunch of 20-year-olds playing video games in the living room. Didn't get infested though. I have had plenty of really awkward situations and seen a bunch of weird stuff on people's computers. Mostly all P related. 1. Probably the weirdest thing I found in a client's computer was corn. This thing was full of corn. I don't know why or how, and I didn't question it. It's also not uncommon to find stuff like roaches. 2. The next one wasn't me, it was a friend. He worked for GameStop back in their prime and was going to buy a broken GameCube off a customer. It's GameStop so they probably gave him a couple cents for it. My friend brought the GameCube in back to see what was up. He started taking the thing apart and found someone had put a whole sandwich in the disc tray. They then repeatedly slammed the disc tray shut, smashing the sandwich farther in until it was part of the machine. 3. This one couple came in because of a virus. But this was way more than a virus. Someone was specifically targeting them. Their computer had so much malware we had to just wipe it. Their phones were constantly ringing. Cell phones and landline. They were getting hundreds of texts and emails every couple minutes. Their bank accounts had gotten hacked as well as other various online accounts. I felt really bad for this couple, and I don't want to mess with whoever they pee off. Also, elderly people watch P. They watch a lot of P. In the company where I did my traineeship, we had to secure the whole HDDs of computers of workers who were leaving the company. A couple of times while securing the corporate notebooks, I found pee on them. In one case it even was homemade pee by that soon-to-be ex-colleague. Didn't care that I was supposed to tell my boss. Never did that and included the stuff on the backups. IT guy for a finance company cleaned up a co-worker's personal laptop from a virus. Found the pics of him and his girlfriend doing everything and anything. He hadn't mentioned anything about it when he gave it to me, but when I gave it back to him he just kind of smirked and was like, "Were you able to save my data?" Dude was hung like a horse too. You never can tell about people. The smirk and the fact he was hung makes me think he totally planned and wanted you to see. Not bizarre but disturbing. I found a bunch of homemade child pee on a school teacher's desktop. I reported it to the cops and they arrested him. My first week on the job, my buddy is doing a data migration and the customer's furry pee collection started flashing by as it was moving photos from one machine to the next. When the guy came in to get the machine, we realized that what we saw were his collection of self-shot photos. So I do IT for school. One day a classmate brought a computer in to fix. I began to work on it and I just found loads of anime pee. Was certainly a strange convo with the kid telling him what was on his machine. It's called hentai, and it's art. Worked at a computer lab support desk at a college and one time this student brought in a laptop and wanted the keyboard to be in Japanese. I opened it up, went and changed the language settings in the control panel for him. He was surprised when the actual physical keys on the keyboard were not changed. He then asked me to change them because his friend had the same laptop with Japanese keys. I replied that his friend must have ordered his with Japanese keys. He proceeded to get furious with me that I wasn't smart enough or wouldn't admit that I wasn't up to date on the latest technology to change the physical keys on his keyboard. Easy. Tell him it will take 2 weeks and $300. Buy one on Amazon for $30. Profit. I'll add my P story. Seems to be a pretty common one. My boss's computer got a virus and he asked me to fix it because he knew I was good with computers. He gave me his work PC and I checked it out. On his desktop was a folder labeled P which was about 500 gigabytes. Checking his browser history it was full of P sites. Pretty obvious how he got a virus. When I told him it was fixed he thanked me and picked his computer up. It was just weird how he didn't seem to care that his employees must have seen his massive P folder on his business computer, and he has a wife and 2 kids. But I guess since he was the owner it didn't matter. After that point, whenever he was in his office I couldn't stop myself thinking about what he must be doing in there, and it changed how I viewed him. God, alright, so my father would take home co-workers' laptops and PCs and troubleshoot problems for them running slowly, freezing, etc. I would come home from school and our kitchen table would look like something from Artich Support Gore. Small, dead animals and bugs like lizards, roaches, and centipedes were way more common than you think. But probably the weirdest thing we've found while blowing dust out of someone's full tower was around $7.50 in change in the case. The guy told my father he found out that his toddler was putting coins in the fan holes. I guess neither of us noticed the jingling in the case while picking it up. Go to pay to use the computer every hour, man. I used to volunteer in a computer hardware store that built and repaired computers. Anyway, there was a local female model who did the odd topless photo shoots and she brought her PC in as it was running slow. Her desktop background was a topless picture of her and her folders on her desktop were all full of pictures of her photo shoots. And when you put a picture in a folder they usually appear as a thumbnail or preview on the folder icon, so yeah, it was a strange experience giving a PC back to a woman who knew 100% I see her tea. If you do it for a living you get inured to people seeing it. Not really bizarre, more devastating really. Older gentleman, maybe early 60s, brings in his computer, says he has a virus and just wants to wipe it and start over, but he wants to keep his pictures. So he leaves the computer and I start searching for pictures. I don't find pictures of family, or his kids, or vacations. I find P. Lots and lots of gay P. So I back it all up for him and unwipe the computer, and put the P in a folder on the desktop labeled backup. I call him and tell him his computer is ready. The next day he comes in to pick up the computer, with his wife. At this point I'm a little nervous. I mean, I have no idea what their relationship is like. But on the desktop there is a folder with thousands of gay P pictures. I don't know what to expect out of this situation. Anyway, they go home and a couple of hours later I get a call from the wife. She very gently implies that we mixed up their backup with someone else's. I wasn't really sure what to say, but I slowly told her the truth of the situation. I felt so bad. I could hear her soul being crushed through the silence. I never saw them again. I have no idea what happened to them. I still wonder. I really hope she is okay now. I would have put it back in exactly the same place it was before. Same path, not in a folder on the desktop in plain sight. Presumably she wouldn't have seen it, as before. Spent a while working for a very large borough council in England in the IT department. One of the senior councillors there could not stay off dodgy P websites. My boss got so sick of having to have us wipe the hard drive and re-image it every fortnight or so due it to being riddled with malware and god knows what, and completely unusable for work, as you couldn't then safely connect it to the network. She got him a second P-only laptop for him to do whatever he wanted, on the strict understanding he didn't use it with the network connection in the office. Not a computer, but a phone. I worked at a wireless provider, and I had this one seemingly nice guy come in every other month stating that he let the neighbor kid use his phone. The browser was always locked up at those ads from P sites that won't let you hit back, and he didn't know how to shut the browser app to clear it. I tried showing him how to close the app, but he kept showing up so I could clear his browser and keep his wife from knowing his secret. It was a weird unspoken deal because we both knew his story was bulls. Fixing a laptop for a shy librarian type lady. Realized there was a disk in the tray and clicked eject. I'm presented with the best of S&M DVD. Fixed her computer and when she picked it up, I said you might want to check the disk tray. Unfazed, she was like, oh god, it was P wasn't it, and laughed. Never judge a book by its cover. LOL. Exactly what you don't want to find. Kids, lots of them without clothes. Instantly noped out of continuing the repair and called the cops. They sat in the back room and I called him up to say it was fixed. Arrested and I gave in my report. He walked away with the cops repeating that he was a naturalist with his creepy high nasal voice and oversized purple suit and mustache. Dog urine was pretty ugly. The laptop was also chewed to crap. In this days, not sure if it's still available, Toshiba had something called System Guard, so we just pulled the HDD and replaced the entire system. Not only is it not available, Toshiba also no longer makes consumer laptops. Not a computer technician, was a garbage man. I grabbed a computer in a wealthy, white neighborhood $1 million homes. The entire hard drive consisted of the operating system and hardcore pee poop on each other Asian gangbang pee. Nastiest stuff I've ever seen. It went right back to the trash. Haha. I found a seahorse in a MacBook Pro. It was in for a water damage repair, and the customer said that some water had just spilled. Later I told the customer and they told me that a kid had spilled the seahorse tank and they couldn't find the seahorse. Now they know where it went. Unfortunately, it did not survive the trip inside the computer. Not quite a job on someone's computer, but I did find a P video along the lines of Snow White gets drilled by 7 dwarfs. I pretended I didn't see it. I've seen this video. It's weird. Also I think it's on Pornhub. And kind of noncan. Had a home visit where the desktop was in an endless boot loop when I arrived. The woman of the house explained her husband was using it and ran a Windows update, and when it was completely rebooted it, and now it was looping ever since. Rebooted with the WINPE flash drive and did a manual system restore and booted it into Windows with the wife sitting there. Computer comes to the desktop with a nude photo of wife splayed across the screen. Wife was mortified. Nah, she pretended to be mortified. Okay, so my ex-girlfriend gave me her old laptop because mine had broken. So I'm turning it on and there was SpongeBob x Mrs. Puff P. I had no words. I couldn't comprehend what the point of that was. Why would you possibly want something like that? Nothing really bizarre, but I can tell you if you smoke in front of your PC it will be absolutely disgusting inside. PCs are mini vacuum cleaners. They suck up all the cigarette smoke and it just coats everything. So, if you want your PC to last longer, smoke somewhere else. Now, the coolest thing that ever happened was I worked with a lady who was a very attractive lesbian. She asked me to fix her personal PC, had a virus, and said, quote, "There's more than likely pictures of me and my girlfriends and you're welcome to look. Consider it payment. Best day at work ever." I said you could look, not clone the fricking hard drive. What is the most computer illiterate thing you've witnessed? We hired a guy for software testing. We gave him a Word document that was basically text and screenshots about the application he was supposed to test. I left him alone for 30 minutes. He finally came to me and told me that he could not log into the application. I asked him what the error was, and he said he could not get the login prompt to accept any text. Well, he did not have the application up. He only had the Word document up. He was trying to log into a screenshot of the application. I couldn't help but laugh my ass off. I used to work tech support for a few ISPs. I once had a customer call in. He had just signed up and received his modem, but couldn't get online. After a few minutes I discovered that he didn't own a computer. I worked for a telecommunications company doing installation of high-speed data and cable. We had an elderly woman call in to set up new internet service, and she asked our call center rep, "Do you supply a modem, or will you use mine?" Our rep stated that we will supply her with a modem. When I got out to her house, I asked where she would like it set up, and she pointed to a monitor and a keyboard on a desk. I looked around but didn't see her PC tower, and it went like this. Me, "Where's the rest of your computer?" Her, "You guys said you'd bring the modem." Me, "Yes, I've got it right here, but where's your tower?" Her, "I threw it away. You said you were bringing one." She thought her PC case was a modem and tossed it, thinking we would be supplying her with a brand new computer. At least 5 times a year I have to deal with my computer froze up, so I grab 2 double A batteries, go over to the employee's desk and place the batteries in the mouse. Voila. You should ask the company to stop buying wireless mice. Once I went to an office where the client was complaining that her computer broke at 10 o'clock every day, so I aimed to get there for 9:30. 10 came and went and not a single error to report. So I go and find the owner and tell her it's all okay. She asked if I could stay on and just check the system over for her. She offered me a cough, which, being a computer technician, I obviously accepted. So, she reaches behind the computer, pulls out the power cord and plugs it into a small kettle by the computer. She then points at the screen and screamed, "Look, it's just gone off again." Me. Okay. Highlight the sentence and right click. She highlighted the sentence, then typed the word click. So, a while back at the company I work at, there was this senior VP in the legal division as a patent attorney. This guy was one of the best patent lawyers at our company at the time. Really intelligent, and a lot of people looked up to him, and there were instances where the fate of the company was in his hands when the company was young and smaller. Now this guy has to deal a lot with patents and contracts, reading them, editing them, approving them, and so on. So with these documents that are typically around 20 pages but sometimes are up to 50, there is a lot of that involved. The editing process for this guy, however, was slightly different. You see, he didn't know how to copy and paste. So what does he do, you ask? He retypes every single contract and patent as it comes through, even for just slight edits. Retypes the whole freaking thing. 20 pages, with every single document he gets. He does this for 2 years before someone finds out and introduces him to copy and paste. One of my favorite workplace stories. I guarantee you this was actually part of his success. If he was forced to retype an entire document, he'd have to process it in his own words explicitly, which would help him truly understand what was going on, and ergo, provide the best suggestions for editing the patent. This sounds like an interesting, albeit tedious, method to truly learn and understand something. A coworker of mine asked me how much it costs to email Canada from the US. Back in the early 90s, we were using Procom to support users remotely. They just had to have a modem, install the software, and give us the number. Anyways, most of our clients were small non-profit outfits, typically staffed by older folks, and one of them was having issues. We tried and tried to connect, got nothing. Asked them repeatedly, "Do you have a modem? Is it plugged in, turned on? Is it attached to the phone line? Is it attached to the computer? etc. etc. All yes." So eventually we decided we'd have to make the 2+ hour drive to their location to help them in person. The modem was duct taped to the side of the monitor with nothing connecting it to the computer, except the tape. I once spent nearly 20 minutes walking a user through copy, paste, and save as in Word. By the end of the call I was sitting slumped over with my head on my desk, muttering into my headset. I'd try to write up a transcript, but my mind has long since blocked the details of that memory. This must have been around 2003. I was working in IT at a big ad agency in NYC. I was doing a database project which dealt with financial data. I went down to accounting to sort some things out with one of the users. When I got there, I looked over the woman's shoulder while she was working and I saw that she had an Excel spreadsheet open. The sheet had a column of numbers along with some other data. I then watched as she manually added up the numbers on an adding machine sitting on her desk and then typed in the total. I was floored. It turned out, the entire department worked like this. I tried to explain to her that Excel will do that automatically, but I was unable to get through. After a couple of attempts, I just gave up and went back upstairs. Older woman using the address book on her computer. Her. How do I send an email? Me. Click on mail in the doc. Double quote. Her. Clicks on mail. Where did my address book go? Me. It's behind the mail window. Her. Looks behind the monitor. The biggest problem is that people who are computer illiterate incorrectly assume that their machine is smarter than them, and that's why they don't understand how to use computers. But in actuality, computers have no idea what you want them to do if you don't tell them in the few ways they understand things. The second biggest issue is impatience and reluctance to read instructions. If you were looking for your keys in your house, you don't immediately give up if they don't show up when you say, "Where is my keys?" Best line I've heard that summarizes this: a computer is a fast idiot. I taught a university class with another instructor which required students to install a bit of software. To help them, I recorded a screen capture film of the installation process with my voiceover. My co-instructor was not very computer proficient, so I played it for him to see if he could follow the instructions. We got to the end of the video and he says, "Great work. That was really easy." Rather pleased with myself, I prompted him to try installing the software. "What do you mean? Isn't it installed?" "No, That was just the instructional video. What do you mean? What you watched was a video of how to install the software. It didn't actually install the software. Did something go wrong with the installation? Best response: when you watch an infomercial about a new stain remover, it doesn't in fact remove the stains from the clothing in your dirty laundry basket. I can never change the homepage in my mom's browser from Google, or she can't use the internet. The internet is gone. Also, if she minimizes a window, it's gone forever. I also administratively locked the dock on her Mac because things kept disappearing. AKA, she clicked and dragged on accident and removed Safari from the dock. Haha, I've also had the internet is gone, as you, but also because the Internet Explorer icon had been deleted. This isn't my story but my dad's. He had his own little business for a while doing computer repairs. He got a call from a middle-aged woman complaining that every time she tried to reach the icons on the right side of her screen, her mouse would fall off the side of her desk. My dad replied, "Have you tried lifting the mouse up and moving it to the left?" Her, "Oh, thanks." My dad ran into someone once that would literally take the mouse and place it on the screen to move the cursor. Their accuracy was subpar since they couldn't see the cursor underneath their mouse. A few years back, a guy brought an Office 2007 and a Sega Dreamcast. Asked if we could install that on this. My dad double clicks on links every time, but he's been using computers for 30+ years and is pretty much the go-to tech support at his company of 20+ employees. He's fairly normal with everything else. That one thing just bugs me. Woman: "I can't copy this file." Me: "Alright, where is it?" Woman: "With my files." Me: "Could you show me where it is? Let's work this out." Woman opens Microsoft Word, goes to the menu and hits open. The file in question was some database file, so it doesn't open. Woman: "See." Me: "Let's go to your desktop and open my documents." Woman closes Word, back to the empty desktop, and proceeds to open Word. Open dialog. Woman: "I can do this normally." Opens a document. File. Save as. Network drive. Save. Me: "I'll rig it." Go back to your desktop. Now click on the icon that says My Documents. Woman: "Word is my documents." Me: "Please mom, let me show you." I grab the mouse, exit Word, and teach her that My Documents exists outside of Word, and that you can drag files to save as them. That day, we figured out why that department had been asking for so many recoveries. I worked for an old guy who had no concept of opening files from Windows Explorer. If he wanted a Word doc, he would open Word and then open the document. Same for Excel. The funny thing was, if he didn't know what application the file was in, he would open each one in turn looking for the file. Used to work at a library with a public computer lab, so I've seen it all. My personal favorite: guy who has probably never used a computer before sits down and then proceeds to pick up the mouse and point it at the computer screen like a remote to try to select things. He was actually a time traveler from the future and couldn't understand your library's primitive technology. Me: "How can I help you?" Her: "Yeah, I know, you can, get bugs in your computer. How do I stop that from happening?" Me: "Wait, do you think you have a virus or something?" Her: "No, bugs." Me: "I'm not sure what you mean." Her: "Well, when I went to, move my computer today, there were these little bugs under the desk, and I wanted to know if those, are the bugs that get in your machine." Me: "Silence." Her: "Are these the bugs?" I then had to explain to her that the computer bugs are not actual insects. It's a nice throwback to why bugs are called bugs. I worked phone tech support during dial-up days. Needless to say, I have a lot of stories. Like a guy using his mouth like a foot pedal, a woman who couldn't get her computer during power outage, and a woman with horrible static on their phone line caused by an electric fence to keep the bears out. But 99% of phone calls went like this: "Caller, I can't get online." Me: "What does the error message say?" Click click. Caller: "It says no dial tone." Me too. Standard power outage fix. Me: "Okay sir, go to your microwave." Sir: Okay." Me: "Switch it on." Sir: "It's broken as well." Me: "Phone your power company." Click. I saw someone once take a digital photo of their computer screen then upload it back onto their computer to be emailed. Bit ashamed, but I've had to do this. Back in my Windows days, my installation was all nuts and buggy and would not print screen, among other things. Also do this if I kill my bootloader, or some other crap during boot. Oh hi there, command line login. Mine is pretty short. My grandparents asked me to come over because their computer wasn't working. What was happening was they couldn't hear any sounds from the computer. I unmuted the computer and turned on the volume. At my last job, my boss was fairly proficient with Excel and he loved to use it. He made a spreadsheet for just about everything and even had some knowledge on using formulas, but every time he wanted to save progress on something he was working on, he would X out of the window and click yes when the pop-up came up asking if he would like to save his document. He would then open the spreadsheet again and resume working on it. Drove me absolutely batshit crazy. When I was working help desk a long time ago, CAD engineer thought rebooting her machine was turning the monitor off and back on. My mother accidentally deleted some icons on her desktop. She called me up freaking out that she deleted AOL. Yes, she still pays for AOL, and all of her emails and email addresses were gone forever. My ex's mother screamed bloody murder at her daughter for signing out of her email. She thought if you weren't signed in, you didn't get the emails. I swear to God, she was absolutely freaking out, and she's a CPA. My dad drove me all the way out to his office so I could fix his computer at work. In his words, he did something to it, and now it was not working. When he shows it to me, the first thing I see is the loose dangling cords for the monitor, keyboard, and mouse. Facepum. I used to work for the civil service. Some managers working remotely would ask their secretaries to print emails and post them to them because they didn't feel comfortable using email. In a similar thread a few months ago, someone who worked at a computer type place had a customer who would come in a couple times a year to buy a new laptop battery. The fellow didn't realize you could recharge laptop batteries. I once saw my mom trying to drag and drop a file across 2 laptop monitors. You have to use an external mouse for that. Plug mouse into one computer, right click, select copy, unplug the mouse, plug it into the other laptop, right click, select paste. What was the most computer illiterate moment you've seen? My boss has to ask me every time he wants to search for an email in Outlook. Not even 20 minutes ago, he called me in again and I reminded him that the search function was where the little magnifying glass was. Like you're looking for clues, like a detective. That's why it's the search icon. I'm not looking for clues, I'm looking for an email. Where do I go for that? It's been a long day. Reminds me of my boss. He just skips the part where he pretends to understand and just makes me do it for him. Master's degree in computer science and I'm showing an old man how to add an image to a Word document. It was the mid 1980s. I was a little kid playing Tetris on my grandfather's computer. My great aunt, who had been born in the 1890s, did all of the family genealogy stuff and knew lots of related regional history and was generally really interesting to be around. Someone had told her that people were using these new computer things to keep up with their genealogy info, and she didn't know anything about them but saw that I did. So after mentioning that, she started telling me some interesting story about distant relatives. I'm still playing Tetris. Later I figured out that she thought I was recording her story into the computer. 1890s kids just don't computer. Oh lord, this happened to me yesterday. 11 PM call from my dad. Son, I was looking at Facebook and I saw other people with my name, but the pictures weren't me. Yeah, that's normal. Other people can have your name. Oh, okay, good night. This one cracked me up the most out of this whole thread so far. Your poor dad, having to face the facts that there are people with the same name as him out there in the world. What a thing to learn on Facebook. We received a call because some guy's printer was printing crap with characters all over it. We racked our brain, changed cables, replaced drivers, and couldn't figure it out. I opened the paper tray and it had used paper in it. I showed him the paper and he said, "Yeah, but doesn't the printer white it out?" I'm actually kind of shocked that you changed the cables before checking the paper. When I was in 8th grade, my mom called the school and asked for me, which usually means something horrible has happened. I go down to the principal's office and pick up the line to hear, "How do I turn on the computer?" My grandfather once called me because he couldn't figure out why his typing was in all caps. Now, of course, we all know that old people are computer illiterate, but just for some extra context, my grandfather builds computers for money, mostly for friends or family members of his friends. It isn't a serious business. He taught himself how to do it as a hobby. He can't take an empty case and a bunch of loose hardware and build a rig from scratch, but God forbid he can figure out how to use one once he turns it on. It's like being a mechanic who can't drive a car. An older woman took a job in my department after lying and saying she was computer literate. The whole job is on the computer. Come to find out she didn't know how to turn the computer on, didn't know how to use the mouse, didn't know any of the lingo, icons, right click, start menu, etc. Nothing. She got fired that day. Used to work in computer repair. The number of times I saw someone bring in only their monitor for a virus removal was, well, surprising. Agreed. A sizable majority of my clients assumed either the monitor or keyboard was the computer and that the computer itself was the modem. I work in a place where the whole job is sitting at a desktop computer for 8.5 hours a day. One time a guy in his 50s needed help finding something in our shared drive, so I went to sit with him and drive his mouse. It was then that I saw the chaos of his desktop. Thousands of files, infinite files. I hit Ctrl and zoomed out until the icons were the size of ants, and I still couldn't capture them all on the screen. That's when I learned that he didn't know how folders work, and he'd been saving everything to his desktop for 20 plus years. Honestly, I was more impressed than depressed. Despite this computer illiteracy, this guy had managed to be a great employee. When I showed him how to make folders and drag and drop things into them and his eyes lit up, it felt like showing a caveman how to make fire. Okay, another one. Customer was adamant that he was right clicking. That's the response I would expect from a left click. Something might be wrong with the configure setting. Drive over. He clearly clicks the left button. I point this out. He was adamant this was a right click because he is using his right hand, and also the mouse is on the right hand side of the computer and even plugged into the right hand USB port. This physically hurts me. Grandma decided to pay me so she could have computer lessons. Lesson number 10. Remembering how to use your email. Me. Okay, Grandma. Now you need to type your password here. Actual Gmail login page. Grandma. Number. Me? Grandma. My computer tells me to never write my password anywhere, so I'm not writing it on this website. This website equals Gmail login page. She got extremely mad that I wouldn't help her get into her email. Now that's next level password protection. I owned a computer store for years. We have a lot of these stories. One is the government department that complained bitterly that the zip cartridges, floppies on steroids, and tape cartridges we were selling them seemed to have trouble keeping data without errors. I went to look, suspecting they were keeping them in a dusty environment, given the nature of the department, and found that no, they were in a clean office, in a sealed plastic tub, sitting on another tub filled with 300 pounds of magnets. Another business complained when we suggested they uninstall Apple desktop printing software because it was incompatible with their Epson printers. They kept reinstalling. Then we had to fix their problems and uninstall the software again. Eventually we find the issue with just not reinstalling the add-on software was they thought that if desktop printing was uninstalled they had to put their printers on the floor. Yes, it seems incredible, but these are not the most astonishing. When a guy at work tried to use the new vehicle tracking system, I was showing him how to use it and asked him to hover the mouse over the symbol of the van on screen. He picked up the mouse and held it up to the monitor. You should have said cursor. I had to set up a co-worker with their computer login and give them all the bookmarks to do their job. Not IT, just happened to be nearby. Me. Okay, so the username is your first and last name with no spaces in between. Her. Points to the saved login on the screen. Is that my name? Me. No, your name is not David. David, for reference, is the name of our IT guy. Her name was not anywhere near that. She didn't last a week. Given we use computers for 100% of the job, I think she lied about how proficient she was with computers. Not just computer illiterate but seems to be literally illiterate. A client that kept a massive quartz crystal next to their laptop because it supposedly absorbs the microwaves that cause cancer. It's a shame quartz crystals cause cancer, too. I used to work in a call center. I was trying to help this very nice old man get logged into his account. His password wasn't working. I wasn't in tech support, but I had to reset passwords and other light support issues. I spent forever with this guy trying to figure out why his new PW wasn't working. I don't remember what triggered it, but I started asking him about his keyboard. Was it wireless? Number. Okay. Check the back of the computer to make sure it's plugged in. His response. Oh no, it's not there. I see the end right here next to me. Sir, I already told you that I am not a computer person. You're refusing to help me, so I'm going to hang up. My mom was complaining that a monthly 3G data plan had run out by week 2 while watching some Korean drama on YouTube. When I told her that watching YouTube video on a 2GB limit was a bad idea, she said I'm not downloading the episodes, just watching them. Was not fun trying to explain to her that watching videos on the internet is downloading. In her defense, I could see where the confusion might be if you don't know how a browser works. Most people just think of the browser as some sort of window to use to view the internet. Not the most, but probably the most frustrating. The woman giving one of the orientation presentations when I started at my job. She would probably be one of the last people I would pick to present anything. She had some sort of disability, so she was in a wheelchair, hooked up to oxygen, and paused every few seconds to take wheezing breaths. Anyway, she got the PowerPoint started by pushing the mouse around until it was over the icon, then lifting up her hand and using one finger to click the mouse. Nothing happened, as she didn't double click. You could feel the tension in a room full of 20-year-olds, most with graduate degrees in some form of technology or engineering. After a few awkward instructions, one guy finally stood up and double-clicked the icon, then showed her how to press PGDWN to advance the slides. Then there was the time my mom emailed me a document by printing it, scanning it, then attaching the image file. She has since learned a little more about computers. I work with a lot of small business owners who often have to send me paperwork, and the printing and scanning a document, or even better, printing and taking a picture with a cell phone, happens way too often. A few years ago, I'd been training a woman in her mid-50s to be my assistant manager in a tiny office setting. I spent several weeks teaching her all the programs and databases we used on the computer, but she had such trouble with everything I was legitimately worried the higher-ups would have to fire her, or that I'd be stuck doing everything. Then one day, she says, "Can I ask you a question?" She hadn't ever asked me questions before, preferring instead to barrel forward regardless of knowledge. So I was actually happy, and said, "Yes, of course. What is this?" And she tapped on the computer. "The base unit." I wanted to die. "Hey, at least," she asked. My mum trying to use a mouse for the first time. She had it upside down and was using it like a roller ball. Every time she wanted to press a mouse button, she'd have to roll the whole mouse towards her and push down. To start with, she'd had the cable going away from her, but that just meant that all of her movements were reversed, i.e. if she wanted the pointer to move to the left, she'd have to roll right. It was a bit of a revelation when I showed her the proper way. TLDR, my mum using a mouse upside down and the wrong way round. My grandmother did this, but then she corrected me that it's a mouse. The tail comes out the back. My former office manager thought that to shut down a computer meant it would literally shut down and never, ever work again. She also didn't know how to use underline and would instead type a row of dashes and type whatever she wanted underlined on the line above. Office manager. By the way, I let my dad borrow my personal laptop a few months back. When I got it back, it was still on, in sleep mode. I opened it and found a multitude of tabs in Internet Explorer. All of them appeared to either be articles he opened from Facebook but never closed, or another tab with Facebook. Instead of going back to the original Facebook tab, he would open a new one and go back to the site. Only at that time did I remember him asking me, while Facebook never remembered where he was at when he was scrolling down. I'm laughing so much imagining him just scrolling and scrolling trying to get to the end of Facebook. Well, It may not be the most computer illiterate, but when my current boss interviewed for his job, he was required to take a finance competency test which involved solving some problems in Excel. At the end of the test, he stated that he needed more time because I wasn't given a calculator. He didn't know that Excel is a calculator. There's also a program called Calculator on every Windows computer. I was training a coworker. Tell her to go to Google. She Googles Google and clicks the first link. Ad that says GoogleNet. Told my boss. She lasted 2 days. I once saw someone trying to figure out how to turn on a computer at Best Buy. He called over a sales dude and said to him, "I tried typing in turn on but nothing is happening. How does this person exist?" You should have told him that he should have typed it in Chinese since many of the parts were made there. I work in IT at a university. We had a fairly new computer set up for an older faculty member. When he finally retired, I took it back to the shop to refurbish and redeploy. The DVD drive was jammed. Normally this means a disk was left in it and slipped a little sideways. After a lot more work than it normally takes, I found a 3.5 floppy disk inserted under the DVD tray. We haven't had floppy drives in at least 5 years and stopped having a supply of disks around 10 years ago. I have no idea what he was trying to do, how he managed to get it where it was, or even where he found one. Also, it was blank and unformatted. I visited an older lady at church once who said her computer got a bad computer virus and would shut off a minute or two after turning it on. Sounded unusual, so I turned it on to see what it was all about. I never heard of a virus do that. It came on, started booting till it read thermal error occurred and shut off, which signaled to me it was a faulty fan. Opening the tower revealed the whole thing was caked with dirt, so I took a vacuum cleaner and keyboard air to clean it out and it worked fine after that. Last I heard from her, she was passing on the info to her friends that viruses could be removed from a computer with a vacuum cleaner. Well, it's very wrong, but at least everyone she tells might actually maintain their computer somewhat. I had to explain to this grown woman, not elderly mind you, how to use a mouse. Like, she really could not comprehend the relationship between this physical object and the on-screen cursor. This was an entirely new concept. This was at a local library, and she was attempting to apply online for unemployment. I work at a library too. I meet people sometimes who have never used Google. Okay, this is more an embarrassing story for me than anything. I work at a big tech company that is vital to most people's computers. Meanwhile, my parents are extremely computer illiterate. I imagine worse than most people's because they don't even try to do anything before asking me. Anyways, my dad calls me while I'm at my desk one day and forces me to explain how to change a folder name over the phone at that very second. No, it could not wait. I realize as I'm explaining that this was going to be miserable. I mean, he didn't know what an icon was or even the desktop. It was a brutal balance of getting heated over my dad not understanding anything I was telling him and trying not to be loud so no one would hear me struggling to explain an extremely basic component of computing. He probably downloaded some P to the shared home PC and needed to hide it. A funny phrase I heard the other day. I was troubleshooting a guest Wi-Fi, and she said, "Oh, it's okay. I have free global Wi-Fi." My reaction was, what? Her friend chimed in for me, "Do you mean 4 grams? Oh yay, that. Free. She's got a terrible realization ahead. When my dad bought me my first computer, an Apple IIe, which I miss, he bought the whole thing. Duo disc, Apple color monitor, 3 boxes of discs, a printer. I was a very excited 3rd grader who wanted to show his favorite aunt the new computer that I was the only person who knew how to use it. Look how smart I am. She asked me how I could use the typewriter if the TV was on top of it. I mean, that's not that surprising in 1983. I work in an electronics retail store. I had a customer buy a modem then return it because it didn't work. When asked who her internet service provider was, she said she didn't have one. She thought you could buy a modem and just pull internet out of the air. I had another customer a couple years ago come in because his phone stopped working. I take a look at it and the screen is black with carbon residue on it and it is separating from the body. I asked him what happened and he said he dropped it in water. So he put it in his oven and baked it at 100 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 minutes to dry it out. Then he did it a second time because it didn't completely dry the first time. There's your problem. You forgot to flip it over halfway through. My friend is a librarian, and she always tells us about all the frustrating crap at work that she has to put up with when it comes to helping people use the computers. Some woman needed help checking her email. She didn't know her username and password. She didn't even realize she had a username and password because it was saved and would keep her logged in on her computer at home. Presumably because her child or grandchild set it up for her and she never had to log in again. Friend helps her get her password reset, which was huge pain in the butt. What really gets me is that when that woman went home, she assuredly would be unable to log into her email again because the password was changed. Probably cursed the librarian for messing up her computer. Same woman didn't know what right click was. Okay, I'm ashamed to say this was me. In my first year of secondary school, high school, we went into the computer labs and logged on, etc. But I still couldn't get the dang screen to turn on. Why, you ask? Because I was pressing the icon on the right side of the screen that meant power on, as if it were a touch screen. The button was on the side of the monitor. I spent 40 minutes doing this. 40 freaking minutes. Some monitors are actually like that now. I had a coworker who called me in a panic because every time she clicked her Mac's mouse a little menu appeared. I walked into her office, looked at her computer and told that she had a dictionary error. She literally had a dictionary sitting on the left edge of her keyboard and it was holding down the control key. It once took me an embarrassing amount of time to figure out why my Word document was suddenly full of long blank spaces. I looked down at my keyboard eventually and noticed my own boobs were resting on the space bar and I hadn't noticed. Whoops. I was giving blood one day, and they had a computer terminal for check-in. There was a lady there before me who was confused, saying that she doesn't use computers. I tried to just walk her through typing in her own name, but she just looked at the computer like it was going to explode if she touched it. Thankfully someone who worked at the Blood Institute came up around then, at which I just excused myself so he could deal with her. Looking back, I came up with an alternate theory: she may have been illiterate and using technophobia as an excuse to hide the fact that she literally cannot spell her own name. The number of adults who manage to function in modern society without knowing how to read is surprisingly high, and it makes more sense than push the keys with letters in the order that spells your name being too difficult to understand. I changed a relative's life by showing her Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V. Apparently she used to just retype stuff out again. Actually, I swear my copy-paste powers are my main asset working for state government too. At least they were when I started less than 10 years ago. I earned my reputation as a computer guru when I showed the Office Ctrl-Z. My dad doesn't understand how tabs work. Every time exit a window just to double click internet again. I've showed him probably a dozen times, he still does it. He's only 52. He also has an Android smartphone. I don't comes to me to ask me how things work. My dad treats his hundreds of multiple tabs like an archive and gets mad if someone closes one. He expects to be able to go back to his collection of open tabs forever. I had a conversation with my older boss that ended up lasting a full hour because he was given a Word document with pictures of someone else's monitor inside. And no, not like a screen capture, an actual photo of a screen monitor with text showing. He wanted to edit the text and send it back, and it took an embarrassingly long time to explain the difference between text and images. His position? CEO of a software company that he himself founded. How the heck can you be that dense about computers and own your own software company? I'm not paying to explain work. I'm paying you to do whatever I desire. When my cat walked on my keyboard, in all seriousness, I think it's when I saw an attorney request his secretary to print out a web page from a site he found onto paper, then have the secretary scan the paper to him so it arrives to the attorney on his computer's email, so he can forward the email to a client in order for them to see the web address. Billable hours. Not completely illiterate, but literate enough to make this hilarious mistake. I was working in software support for a website my company has. I asked the user to send me a screenshot of the error they were getting. So what do? Print screen. Good start. Paste into Word. Print in black and white. Scan printed copy. Email me the scanned copy. Points for creativity. Oh, this is easy. I am a professor and teach the sort of bioinformatics for dummies class. I have had multiple students who don't know that you press enter after you put in a command. They think everything is like Google and just finishes your thought for you and runs the command. Coworker came up to me and asked me where the Q button was. He had a customer and said he was there looking for it for 45 minutes. Yesterday is a good one. User calls about her wireless mouse not working. I asked if she unplugged anything, if it was on, the LED battery light color, etc. Nada. I go up, it's working. I leave. She calls 20 minutes later with same issue. I ask again if she changed anything. She says no, she only plugged her phone into charge. I go back up and she took out her phone cable. So I see she removed the USB receiver to plug in her phone. Lady, you changed something and you didn't like the results. Change it back. She probably won't call me again. I worked help desk and support for a group of medical clinics and have a few fun stories. I had a doctor call in complaining that his computer was beeping at him. I could actually hear it in the background and told him that I'm pretty sure he just has a key stuck on his keyboard. He informed me that I was wrong and that his PC was broken and he needed a new one ASAP. So rather than argue, I told him I would be out to check it personally. I walk into his office to the sound of a constant beep and identified the problem immediately. He started to ask me when he would expect a new PC, because he had a lot of work to do, maintaining eye contact. I fixed the problem. He had apparently run out of room on his desk for the latest drug rep paperweight, so he had left it on the number pad portion of the keyboard since he didn't use those keys that much. I'm an elementary school teacher and during our first week of school teachers are there setting up rooms without kids. During that time I had to help 8 people set up their Apple TVs. Setting up an Apple TV is literally plugging in an HDMI cable and the power cord. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.